Every Diwali, air quality nosedives. We call it a public health emergency and then we forget about it as the smog clears. But what happens to our lungs and our body? Is the damage done is reversible? To talk about all these important points, I have with me Dr. Anurag Agarwal, who is a Dean of Biosciences and Health Research at Ashoka University. He is also a pulmonologist and former director at Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology. Thank you, Dr. Agarwal, for joining us. Doctor, can you explain what happens to human lungs and other organs when we give those organs the exposure of AQI surpassing 400 and 500 every year?
Hi, Himani. It's a pleasure to be here, and of course, not a pleasure to be speaking on this topic again, because it never seems. And as you know, this problem starts well before Diwali as well. And the basic problem of this kind of sustained pollution exposure, both on the lungs and the heart, even the brain, and the endocrine organs, are multi-level. I mean, from the lungs point of view, the most sensitive are those people who have asthma or lung diseases like COPD. They suffer choking, narrowing of airways, difficulty breathing. Almost every one of us, whether or not we have asthma, will see a sustained rise in blood pressure at these high levels, and people who have uncontrolled hypertension can do worse. People with heart failure can see worsening of it. And in fact, we are cutting down the lifetime of our neurons, accelerating the time to dementia, accelerating the time to diabetes. All these things are also happening because these pollution particles, once they get in through our lungs into our body, will damage every place, not just the lungs. But lungs, of course, is the one that is the most obvious thing that, people who have sensitive lungs, they just can't breathe on those days.
So during those days, I generally feel heaviness in my head or something in my chest. Those kind of feelings are real. Sometimes I feel that maybe I'm making it because I know that AQI is so high. So do we have palpable symptoms during that time when the AQI is above 500 or so?
Oh, absolutely. Headaches, not being able to concentrate, feeling that, one is not working at peak potential mentally is absolutely part of high exposures to pollution. And yes, it is not just after Diwali. It is something that occurs throughout the winter season. But the highest levels, of course, tend to be around Diwali, and very obvious reasons. I will not challenge people's intelligence by saying why that is so. But and during Diwali, by the way, the levels can easily cross 1,000. Many of these portable machines have an upper limit of 1,000. So what you see is that after 999, they simply can't give a higher number. And on Diwali day, or maybe just the morning after, the number crosses the limit of these machines.
So yesterday, Supreme Court has given a go-ahead for using green crackers during this Diwali. So scientifically, how safe these green crackers are, or how effective they are, or is this a cosmetic change that has been made?
I mean, it's mostly cosmetic. I mean, the green crackers are, say, half as polluting as other things, but that does not really make them safe by any standards of the world. And to be honest, we have seen a variety of things, right, from courts. We have seen banning of firecrackers that, of course, we all know how much things work during the cracker bans and things like this. So it is one of those things where it's a half measure, it's symbolic, it is possibly the best the court can do, assuming that people will continue to burst crackers. Personally, from a health point of view, what one would like to see is given that as long as crackers are there will be abuse in the market. There will be people who will be saying, well, if you don't like crackers, wear a mask. I mean, we have doctors groups with people have such opinions. So it is possibly best just to ban crackers completely. But yeah, is there a small difference between using green crackers versus not? Yes, there will be a small difference.
So while you gave a long list of diseases that are associated with the poor AQI, do you think this sort of deteriorated air quality also puts us uh, vulnerable to cancer incidents as well, specifically the lung cancer?
I'm sure it will theoretically. Um, Trouble with cancer and long periods of exposure, particularly in non-smokers. Other things become more important, like exposure to chulas and things like this. And again, that's an excuse used by many people saying that anyway in India, people are so exposed to bad air because of chulas and things like this. But again, that's where you take action, right? It's not a justification. I'm certain that long-term risks of cancers will be changed, but that's over a really long time. I would think more about the acute things like hypertension worsening, diabetes worsening, and of course, most important, asthma exacerbations, COPD exacerbations. People leave the city and the country, those who can afford to, who have significant disease.
Right, right. So many argue that it's just a few days of bad year. Do we have a scientific evidence that shows that how long this kind of an air exposure would lead to certain defects in the human body, or we have some studies that show even a short exposure is equally harmful?
Well, short, intense exposure is differently harmful from mid-level long-term exposure. Let's put it like this.
Right.
For people with sensitive airways or people with actual lung disease, um, short and intense can do very bad things, right? I mean, the asthmatic can land in a hospital with a short, intense exposure. For a person, when we are looking at risk of developing diabetes or losing hypertension control and things like this, intermediate long exposures are probably equally bad. It's kind of like smoking, right? I mean, one can say smoking is bad and increases the risk. These are cumulative things. You smoke very heavily for a few years, or you smoke 2 cigarettes a day for multiple years. The way we calculate the risks is by a combination called pack years. And something similar, except for intense air pollution levels and for the sensitivity of individuals. So I think that intense exposures like occurred around the Diwali time are particularly bad for some types of people, and there is plenty of evidence. People look at admissions. That's the simplest way, right? If I'm making you sicker, then the people will show more admissions around that particular time.
Mm.
And people have looked at the number of admissions with asthma exacerbations, heart failures. AIMS has done the study, Pune has done the study, multiple places. Consistently, everybody finds that for people with sensitive diseases, exacerbations go up quite a bit and admissions also go up. And it's very obvious, actually, to be honest.
Right. For a normal, healthy human body, how does this air reacts in that body? If a person is healthy, but a long-term exposure to this kind of air quality, how does that body reacts to that?
Well, that's an easy one to answer. You stay healthy for a shorter period of time. If you're healthy before it starts, sooner your health will end compared to what it would be without this. And what disease would come? It could be anything from diabetes. Wonderful paper from my colleague Purnima Prabhakaran on this, that pollution exposure is driving diabetes to a degree. And of course, heart failure, heart disease, asthma, COPD in particular. Lung fibrosis also for people who have very specific reactions to not just smoke, but metallic smokes with metals and hypersensitivity constraints.
Right, right. So, what do you think is the role of a common man here? Is this only to avoid taking cars to your office and wearing mask, or we can do something else as well?
Well, everybody must first recognize that there is a problem, right? And it is extremely disappointing when even doctors don't seem to recognize there is a problem and feel like saying that we must burst firecrackers because it's our festival. Many people make it about a Hindu versus Muslim thing. It's not. It is simply about recognizing a common problem, right? And what can the common person do? The common person can contribute in whatever way they can, at least not make things worse by doing things that are out of the normal. If you cannot help it, well, keep it down to a minimum and at least try that you compensate for it. Now, you cannot compensate for extra Diwali crackers on a given day by riding a bike the other days, right? I mean, that simply doesn't work. It's about intense short exposures on Diwali. But yeah, I think it's just being cognizant to everything from the way we burn garbage to the cars that we use to the type of vehicles that we buy. To if you're a farmer, to how you dispose of your crops after it is done, and of course today's main conversation, if you are a sensible citizen of the country, recognize that the air is a shared resource, and um, you know telling people who don't like it to wear a mask is not very different from connecting your sewage supply towards the water line and saying please use an RO. It's not terribly different.
Right. I'm sure that by now people who already have respiratory issues know their toolkit. But what would be your advice for those people for the coming few days?
Well, stay safe. One of my friends, I just flew in from London this morning. The AQI was 10. And so it's an unseen number. And another one of my friends was leaving, saying that he's leaving for better AQI. Why are you back? So, that's not an option. But if you are truly at risk, consider being out of the city into somewhere where problems are a bit less. Of course, London is not the answer. Uh, Use air purifiers. So, whatever little evidence that we have, there is clearly a reduction in the acute response when people are placed in a room with an air purifier in the middle of bad air outside. Last, people who don't have air purifiers can reduce the impact of an intense exposure using masks. And finally, like everything else in this world, what you eat, your antioxidants in your diet, all these things matter. So a healthier diet, better styles, doing your exercises regularly, and I'm not suggesting going out into the smoke to the exercise, probably will make your body fitter to handle these insults. But above all, try to be a good citizen.
Okay, so doctor, we have a long list of health issues that can emerge out of this kind of AQI levels that we have been seeing annually. The truth here is simple. If we don't fight for the cleaner air today, our bodies will become the cost tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Imani.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.